If you grew up in the 1970s, your home was filled with items that were once considered must-haves, but have since vanished. Remember avocado green appliances? How about those loud patterned sofas covered in plastic? From rotary phones to console TVs, these relics of the past defined an era, and we didn't think twice about them at the time. But as the years went on, styles changed, technology advanced, and many of these once iconic home items disappeared completely. Some we miss, while others, well, maybe it's better they stayed in the past. So, let's take a walk down memory lane and revisit the home items from the 1970s that no longer exist. The console television. In the 1970s, a television wasn't just an electronic device. It was a piece of furniture. Console TVs were enormous, often encased in polished wood with built-in speakers. Some even had cabinets with doors that could close, making the TV disappear when not in use. These TVs were heavy, so much so that moving one was practically a family event. If you needed to get behind it to adjust the rabbit ears or connect a new cable, you had to recruit at least one other person to help lift it. As technology improved, sleek and lightweight TVs took over. By the late 90s and early 2000s, these bulky wooden consoles became obsolete, replaced by flat screens that could hang on a wall. Do you remember sitting on the floor in front of a console TV, flipping the dial through just a handful of channels? Avocado green and harvest gold appliances. Back in the 70s, no kitchen was complete without appliances in avocado green or harvest gold. Refrigerators, ovens, and even dishwashers proudly sported these earthy tones, making every kitchen look like it was trapped in a time warp. Paired with dark wood cabinets and linoleum floors, it was the height of kitchen fashion. These colors were everywhere, and they weren't just limited to appliances. Mixers, blenders, and even toasters came in these shades. The idea was to bring a natural feel to the home. After all, avocado green was inspired by the trendy health foods of the decade. But by the 1980s, people were ready to move on. White, black, and stainless steel appliances took over, making the once beloved greens and golds look outdated overnight. Shag carpets. If you lived through the 70s, you definitely remember shag carpets. They weren't just floor coverings, they were a lifestyle. Thick, plush, and often in wild colors like burnt orange, mustard yellow, or deep brown. Shag carpets were the epitome of 70s home decor. The problem? They were impossible to keep clean. Dust, crumbs, and who knows what else would disappear into the deep fibers, never to be seen again. If you ever tried vacuuming a shag carpet, you'd know. It was like wrestling with the floor itself. By the 80s, people started opting for lower pile carpets, or, eventually, hardwood and tile floors. While some homeowners still hold on to their vintage shag, most of us are glad this trend faded away. Did your house have a shag carpet? And more importantly, do you remember the feeling of sinking your toes into it? Wood paneling. In the 70s, wood paneling was everywhere. Living rooms, dens, even basements were covered in these dark, faux wood sheets, giving homes a cozy, but often dim, atmosphere. The idea was to create a rustic, nature-inspired aesthetic, but in reality, many of these panels were just cheap, thin wood veneer. Over time, they warped, scratched, and made rooms feel smaller and gloomier than they really were. By the 80s and 90s, homeowners began painting over them or tearing them down completely. These days, if you see wood paneling in a house, it's likely a relic of the past, or an ironic nod to 70s nostalgia. The rotary phone. Before smartphones, before touch-tone dialing, there was the rotary phone. These heavy-duty devices had a circular dial that required patience and precision. If you had to dial a number with lots of nines or zeros, it felt like an eternity. Every house had at least one, usually mounted on the kitchen wall or placed on a side table in the living room. And of course, the long, curly cord would always get tangled no matter how careful you were. By the late 80s and early 90s, push-button phones replaced them, and eventually, cordless and cell phones made landlines almost obsolete. Today, kids wouldn't even know how to use a rotary phone. Do you remember the satisfying click of the dial returning after each number? And how frustrating it was if you misdialed at the last second. Sunken living rooms. Back in the 70s, if you wanted your home to feel luxurious and modern, you needed a sunken living room, also known as a conversation pit. These were recessed seating areas, often lined with plush couches or shag carpeting, designed to encourage socializing in the most groovy way possible. You'd step down into the space, creating a cozy and intimate setting, perfect for late-night chats, cocktail parties, or just lounging in style. It felt futuristic at the time, almost like something out of the Jetsons. But as time went on, sunken living rooms became a hazard. People tripped, furniture didn't fit well, and cleaning them was a nightmare. By the 80s and 90s, they started disappearing, and most modern homes have done away with them completely. Giant stereo consoles. Before Bluetooth speakers and streaming services, the centerpiece of any music-loving household was the massive wooden stereo console. These beasts weren't just record players. They had built-in AM/FM radios, turntables, and sometimes even an 8-track or cassette player. They were huge, often stretching across an entire wall and doubling as furniture. Some had hidden compartments where you could store your vinyl records. And let's not forget, those speakers packed a punch. But as the 80s brought compact stereos and boomboxes, these once prized pieces of furniture quickly became outdated. Today, they're mostly found in thrift shops or antique stores, a reminder of a time when music was a whole experience. Popcorn ceilings. Popcorn ceilings. The textured, bumpy ceiling treatment that every 70s house seemed to have. They were supposed to be great for absorbing sound and hiding imperfections, but in reality, they just trapped dust and were impossible to clean. The worst part? If you ever needed to paint or repair them, it was a messy process. Bits of the ceiling would flake off, getting everywhere. By the 90s, smooth ceilings became the new standard, and homeowners rushed to scrape off their popcorn ceilings. Today, they're a relic of the past. Unless you still have one in your house, in which case, good luck getting rid of it. Did you ever stare at your popcorn ceiling, trying to find shapes in the texture? Waterbeds. Nothing screamed futuristic luxury in the 70s quite like a waterbed. It wasn't just a mattress, it was an experience. Filled with water and encased in vinyl, these beds promised comfort and relaxation, often paired with a wooden frame or even a built-in stereo system. The problem? They were a disaster waiting to happen. If they leaked, your bedroom turned into a flood zone. They were also ridiculously heavy, making them nearly impossible to move. By the 90s, people realized that regular mattresses were far more practical, and waterbeds slowly disappeared. These days, you'd be hard-pressed to find one outside of a retro-themed hotel room. Ashtrays everywhere. In the 70s, ashtrays were a standard part of home decor. They weren't just tucked away, they were on coffee tables, dining tables, even in the bathroom. And they weren't cheap plastic trays either. Some were fancy ceramic or glass, often decorated with patterns or gold trim. It wasn't just because people smoked a lot. It was also a sign of hospitality. If you had guests over, you had to offer them a cigarette and a place to ash. Some homes even had built-in ashtrays installed into walls or tables. As attitudes towards smoking changed and indoor smoking bans became common, ashtrays vanished from homes. Today, they're mostly seen as antiques, a reminder of a time when smoking was just another part of daily life. Do you remember when every car in every home had at least one ashtray? TV antennas. Rabbit ears. Before cable and streaming, if you wanted to watch TV, you had to fiddle with the antenna, also known as rabbit ears. These metal rods stuck out from the top of your television, and adjusting them just right was an art form. Sometimes you'd have to stand in a certain spot or hold the antenna just to get a clear picture. And when the weather got bad, forget it. Your screen turned into a storm of static and wavy lines. With the rise of cable in the 80s and 90s, rabbit ears became obsolete. But for those who grew up in the 70s, the struggle to find the perfect signal is something we'll never forget. Rotating color wheel. Lamps. In the 70s, if you wanted to add some psychedelic flair to your home, you got a rotating color wheel lamp. These were usually placed next to an aluminum Christmas tree, and as the wheel turned, it bathed the room in shifting colors: red, blue, green, and yellow. It was like having a built-in light show in your living room, perfect for setting the mood at a party or just staring at in amazement. But as more modern holiday decorations took over, these groovy color wheels disappeared. Today, they're mostly seen in vintage Christmas displays or hidden in attics. Telephone tables. Back when homes had landline phones, they weren't just stuck anywhere. There was a special table just for the telephone. These telephone tables usually had a built-in seat, a shelf for the phone book, and a small surface to take notes. Since phones were corded, you couldn't just walk around while talking, so these tables were prime gossip spots. It's where teens whispered secrets, parents planned the week, and long-distance calls were made with careful time limits. By the late 80s and 90s, Cordless phones made these dedicated tables unnecessary, and once cell phones took over, they vanished completely. Did your house have a designated phone station? Carpeted bathrooms. Yes, you read that right. Back in the 70s, it was common for bathrooms to have wall-to-wall carpeting instead of tile or linoleum. The idea was that it made the bathroom feel warm and luxurious, but in reality, it was a disaster. Spills, splashes, and humidity made mold and mildew a major problem. Plus, cleaning a carpeted bathroom was nearly impossible. By the 80s, most people realized this wasn't the best idea, and thankfully, it disappeared. Did you or someone you know have a carpeted bathroom? How did they keep it clean? The 1970s gave us some truly unforgettable home trends. From avocado green kitchens to shag carpets you could get lost in, these household staples shaped our childhoods in ways we didn't even realize at the time. Some of them we miss, like the sturdy console TVs and cozy wood-paneled dens. Others? Well, let's just say we're happy to have moved on. What do you remember from the homes of the 70s? Were there any weird or wonderful home items you had that aren't on this list? Let's keep the conversation going. Drop your memories in the comments below.